Man, look at that. So pretty much some of the things that I said were going to happen in the direction of Teofimo against Shakur happened in the opposite direction. Congratulations to him. I definitely underestimated Shakur Stevenson, and I think if you look at my video from yesterday, like some of the things that I mentioned that I kind of hinted at could be a good thing for Shakur Stevens, but then I was like, no, I don't think so. They were definitely there. They were definitely there. And coincidentally, after I'd already posted the video, I rewatched the fight with Teofimo and Josh Taylor, and I could see, that he struggled a bit with southpaws more than I gave him credit with. But I'm not completely backtracking and saying, oh, like after I watched the fight, I changed my mind. I still didn't. I was definitely wrong because I figured Josh Taylor is way taller, and that's a different situation. He's like 6 feet tall, very long reach, and so being southpaw and staying on the outside, can definitely be more of a problem than I thought Stevenson would have given him for being southpaw. So after watching that fight last night, Josh Taylor, I mean, rewatching it, I just like brought my confidence down a notch, but I still thought Teofimo would be able to pull off pretty much exactly what happened in the opposite direction. I didn't think it was going to be like, knockdowns and hurting him and all that stuff, but just landing some better punches and that Shakur would be a little bit marked up. But as we saw, that's exactly what happened with Teofimo. He was getting the punches landed. If you look at my last video where I was saying, in my mind, when I compare the defensive responsibility and the defensive consistency of Lomachenko, at least in that fight against Teofimo Lopez, that Teofimo was still able to just land very large punches, hard punches on a person who's very difficult to hit. So now this comes down to, is Shakur Stevenson harder to hit than Lomachenko? I don't feel confidently about either direction. So I would say they're pretty similar. But typically, I'm a big proponent of, if someone comes up from a lower weight class, I feel like everyone focuses on size and power, and like that matters. But at these little tiny differences, I think it's often usually just the person who comes from a lower class to the higher that's faster, sharper, sees the other person's punches and what they're planning just that quarter second, eighth of a second before they do, or before it lands. So they wind up having advantages, in my opinion, the smaller fighter. But in this case, it looks like, even for his weight class, Teofimo has a very fast and speedy decision making in his offense. And so I don't think coming up from 135 is going to be that huge advantage in defense for Shakur. I wouldn't be too surprised if that happened because, he is coming up from a lower weight, and maybe I'm missing something on video that Teofimo's not 135 fast. But I think to note would be, is Teofimo Lopez going to struggle because Shakur is a southpaw? And, that definitely can throw a wrench into any kind of thinking like, oh, well, such and such is better than the other or faster than the other. But then once they're dealing with a southpaw, it's like they're going to perform a lot less with a lot less quality. And that happens. That sometimes happens. And sometimes it's just that 5% difference that can really show over the course of a 12-round fight in these like high-level fights where you wouldn't say that such and such fighter is bad at fighting southpaws, but there's just a little edge. They have that experience edge, and it shows. It didn't seem like he had any kind of like, less quality of performance where you could see him kind of like, I was in the wrong position because it was a southpaw, or I missed this punch, or I got hit with this punch because he was a southpaw. It seems like he manages himself quite well against southpaws. Pretty much exactly that he definitely was not able to, Teofimo was not able to dominate with the jab because of, I don't want to take credit away from Shakur. I think it wasn't just because he was southpaw, but that doesn't help sometimes. But I definitely underestimated his distance control, just his general IQ as a fighter to see what's happening and what's going to happen and what the best thing to do is in a given second. And that showed that Teofimo never felt confident enough to be landing those jabs. And literally the exact opposite of what I said, that Shakur was able to use the jab. And I feel like it was just disastrous. On the note of like, is he able to maintain, responsibility in the lights because of the slap incident? It's like, that's crazy because he really was so responsible. In the 10th round, in the 11th round, he could have really tried to turn it up and keep, going for a knockout. But instead you see that he literally was just like, if I'm landing this jab that hard on your face so easily and so comfortably and so safely, I'll just keep doing that. And you can beat the crap out of a guy with a jab, real nice jab with knuckles and your body behind it. And that's what he did. He just kept taking those jabs. It just felt like the risk to reward ratio for his jab was too good for Stevenson. He just was like, you're eating this jab real nice and hard, and I'm comfortable and safe the whole time. So yep, we'll just keep doing that. And on that southpaw note, you don't see Teofimo really trying to dominate with his jab, or even like that he could really land it. He kept pulling with it, and it just didn't work. And you would see him, to my point of saying how he can get like 4 punches off and his placement is pretty good, you would see him lead in with the right hand to the body and then the left to the head and kind of get like a little 4-punch flurry off. But I think that Shakur was way too good at, in those exact moments, making that like tiny movement closer to him to smother, or the tiny movement this way, and nothing really landed too solidly. It was mostly just arm shots. So definitely an eye-opener video. Definitely recognize some mistakes in what I saw and what I assumed. As I also said in that video about how I typically think the lower weights have the advantage, but I didn't quite give it to Stevenson. I guess I missed that as much as it was, and it seemed like he does, because the speed of Teofimo to land his offense just did not seem to be a problem for Shakur at all. He was very calm, very comfortable. And I have to admit where I'm wrong. I thought, if Shakur was going to win a decision, it would be because he stayed on his bike and ran. And he did not do that at all. He stayed right in front of him, stayed very calm, and did precisely what I thought he was going to have a hard time doing. So I missed that IQ difference, maybe coming up from 135. On another note, it looks like Teofimo was talking about moving up to 147. And I think for the exact same reason, I thought there's a potential small chance of Shakur Stevenson having, a speed advantage from coming up from that weight. I think maybe Teofimo would be able to do the same thing, and maybe it would be good for him to move up to 147 against the right fighter. But wow, on to the next one. Great performance, and congratulations. Not that he needs it from me, but that was a great performance. A very responsible, calculated performance from Stevenson. And yeah, I guess I didn't watch enough fights to foresee this happening. So that is what it is. You learn.